Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. We haven't had to wait for new information for too long, as today Creative Assembly have finally dropped the full roster reveal for Khorne. As always, we had early access to this, so I've been able to look through it, and just like Kislev, we're going to do a full analysis covering the lore and how we expect the units to work with any other details. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in. There are plenty of new units for the Khorne roster, but of course we have to start off with the singular legendary lord, Skarbrand. There's not really too much to discuss about him, as we've already done a lot of that already, but he does have two unique abilities and skills. Wrathful Reaper. Skarbrand, once in the midst of battle, will not be distracted and will kill until the killing is done. Nothing will stand in his way. I'm assuming that he's just fully unbreakable, as that makes complete sense for Skarbrand. And then Rage Embodied. All those who see the Exiled One in battle are drawn to the furiosity of his combat. They will join him even if it means their death. So how this worked in the tabletop was that he was able to give everyone frenzy. It might be interesting if this is a buff not only to his own units but also to his enemies, which will increase their leadership, making them stay in the battlefield for longer. This makes it the whole blood for the blood god thing where everyone is constantly fighting. We're gonna have to wait and see, but that would be kinda cool, wouldn't it? But now let's move on to our generic lord options, where interestingly enough we have two. First up is the Exalted Bloodthirster. Exalted Bloodthirsters are not only the deadliest of Khorne's demons, but the mightiest of all demonkind. A single such beast is a harbinger of bellowing death, destructive beyond telling, and lives only to slaughter, maim, and destroy all that it encounters. It is the fury of war given form, the unfettered primal rage of the world made manifest, and such should be expected of a beast whose master is the dark god of bloodletting, slaughter, and murder. Second only to Skarbrand in their power both on and off the battlefield, Exalted Bloodthirsters are monstrous, destructive, and incredible forces of nature. Terrifying, flying, blood-fueled deathbringers, they lead only the mightiest of war hosts. Alright, so we already knew about these. A monstrous legendary lord that's able to fly. Hopefully Creative Assembly are able to put in the toggle, as it would just be very useful for this lord. But other than that, I mean, they look cool. The concept art looks pretty damn awesome, and it's just going to be nice to see a Exalted Bloodthirster. The original one was actually from Forge World. I don't know what they're going to do eventually with other Bloodthirster types, as there were 3 that were introduced during the end times, but likely maybe they won't be brought in. Our second lord entry was actually quite surprising, the Herald of Khorne. Most feared of all amongst the bloodletters are the dread Heralds of Khorne. To hear their call is to know your skull will be collected in mere moments by the deliberate, merciless leaders of Khorne's armies. As a herald's rage grows, all nearby demons of Khorne become gripped by an irresistible fury that lends further intensity to the carnage. They hack and cleave their foes until there is nothing left save for a mound of corpses and another victory for the blood god. Occasionally, a particularly favoured Herald of Khorne is granted a juggernaut, mighty beasts of groaning iron and brass, taller than a man and possessed of crushing mass, to better pursue his master's goals. Such a pairing is far deadlier than the sum of its parts. Should a foe survive the frenzied biting and goring, they are likely to be crushed beneath its brass body or cut down by the rider. Those who go above and beyond the call to slaughter may be granted a blood throne, a mighty demon engine armored in brass and driven into battle by iron-shod wheels, which crush and mangle all who stand in its path. From atop his macabre throne, the herald searches for foes whose skulls will make the most audacious offerings. Those plundered from cowards are fed into the blood throne's baleful workings, consumed in fire to bring the demon engine fresh vigor. Those taken from the valiant are claimed by the herald and fused with the throne itself. to stand throughout eternity as grim monuments to the futility of opposing Khorne. So the reason why I found this as a weird lord option is because generally exalted demons are the ones that end up being lord options, and in the tabletop we did have exalted heralds, so it's just kind of weird. This is further then changed when we go down to the hero section, but other than that everything seems as expected. While the Bloodthirster itself acts as a melee legendary lord, the Herald of Khorne acts as a buffer. You'll be able to take him into melee without a problem, and the fact that he has two pretty good mounts, the Juggernaut and the Blood Throne, is going to keep him alive, but also being able to buff up your forces is going to be quite good. I'm not sure if it's just the Blood Throne which is going to offer some buffs, or he's going to have some natural buffs that he can take as skill points anyway, but we're going to have to wait and see. I've also just had a thought while recording where there could still be an exalted Herald of Khorne, but maybe it's being saved up for one specific character. I'm of course referring to Skulltaker. That way he's got a unique rank. But let's move on to the heroes, as I have a feeling that you guys will be rather curious about these too. First off, we have the Cultist of Khorne. The cults of Khorne can be found across the world, less fond of the other clandestine trappings that accompany the other darker powers. The blood cults quickly take hold in arenas and fighting pits, although secret martial lodges dedicated to the Lord of Skulls have been discovered in the higher echelons of society. It is the cultists of Khorne that establish and propagate such sects, roaming far and wide to serve their god, spreading corruption in their stead. Their methods are as often insidious as they are direct, from founding illicit fighting dens to causing all-out riots. Strong cultists are constantly hunting out rivals to fight, with the victor claiming the slain's warriors as their own. Some will aspire to rise and become true champions of Khorne, but there are plenty eager supplicants who simply wish to murder and slay in the blood god's name, and so spread the cult's influence far and wide. Some ride a great warhorse, a sign of status for only the best warriors. The steeds ridden by these tribes are powerful beasts, foul-tempered and strong of limb. Once a rider has broken such a horse, it will remain loyal to him until death, but remain vicious and unruly should a stranger approach. Fed on a diet of human flesh and watered-down blood, these snorting, high-spirited steeds have a glint of intelligence menace in their eyes, and will trample, kick and bite as if berserk when engaged at close quarters. Okay, so I'm assuming this is going to act like a very basic melee character, just your very basic baseline type of character, like an Empire Captain and so on. That's more or less expected, but it's very strange that they only have access to a Chaos Steed. I was expecting at least a chariot or something. It looks like one of those heroes that might not get used much. Maybe it's got some interesting mechanics tied to it, such as spreading corruption, maybe public order issues and so on within human territories, as you can expect a cultist to do that. But now let's move on to the second hero choice, the Blood Reaper, which has been causing a bit of confusion throughout the community. Bloodletters who have proven their devotion and legitimized their existence, Blood Reapers are some of Khorne's most deadly individual fighters. Each carries a Hellblade, a jagged iron sword whose blackened blade glows with heinous enchantment. A wound from one of these weapons can slay even the hardiest hero, draining their soul and sucking dry their shriveled corpse. The Hellblade is formed from the Blood Reaper's own essence, and can never be discarded nor torn from its grasp. Each life taken by it strengthens the Blood Reaper, fueling both its power and rage. As such, a Blood Reaper is even more terrifying at a battle's close than its start, having gorged itself on the slaughter it has caused. If that were not enough to crush and terrify the foe, a deadly combination of battle-frenzied Blood Reaper and the unstoppable crushing mass of a Juggernaut of Khorne can appear. There are those that sit atop a mighty blood throne as a mark of status, a physical manifestation of the blood god's favor. The Blood Reaper that resides atop its pinnacle does not rest or repose as would another in its position, but prowls relentlessly as the chariot advances, eyes and tongue twitching madly in anticipation of the next kill. Favored by their god, Blood Reapers are the locus of any fight they charge into, bringing the energy of their god and his fury together. They can inspire those around them to ever-increasing ferocity, hardiness, and murder. So, before anything, this is not a completely new demon. In fact, this is probably what the name for the Herald of Khorne should have been, with the other herald being the Exalted Herald. But name changes aside, it's going to act like a hero variant of the Herald, so yeah, we already know how it's going to work. The 2 mount options are already expected. Shame that it's not also able to ride atop the Skull Cannon too, but I guess they didn't want to have artillery-based heroes. But now let's jump into the units, and there's a decent amount in all honesty, with a fair few surprises. Let's start off first with the infantry, with the first being Chaos Warriors of Khorne. A Chaos Warrior of Khorne has no need of food, drink, or sleep, for he is nourished by the carnage that he wreaks. He has nothing but contempt for the weak or the cowardly, and goes about the business of murder with a vengeance. For there is always a part of the man who was that rages against that which he has become. A Chaos Warrior's only solace is in slaughter, the fulfillment of his new existence as an instrument of his blasphemous god's will. And at battle's end, his armor is spattered with the lifeblood of the slain. Chaos Warriors of Khorne are fighters of unmatched prowess. Their strength is infernal, and their bodies are as tough as the Iron Mountains, imbued with the power of the Blood God and encased in suits of hell-forged armor. A Chaos Warrior is equal to several battle-hardened mortal men. They are no longer truly human, but living weapons, honed perfectly for the bloody task before them. Okay, so yeah, we can expect that. It's weird that they say that they have some remorse in a sense. This is usually not the case for the grand majority of Chaos Warriors. 3 variants exist, adding to a fair amount of troops: axe and shield, dual axes and halberds, so you've already got your anti-infantry, your basic tanking units, and your anti-large. It's curious that this is the first mortal unit that we're getting for Khorne's roster, as we more or less all were expecting some sort of marauder types too, but these are fairly strong troops, and I guess it fits with the whole theme of Khorne being focused on melee combat, rather than having some weak chaff just going straight in for something powerful. This is likely a way to balance the fact that you have no range and no magic, so I guess that works quite well. But now we'll move on to the first demon units, that of the Bloodletters and Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne. First, the basic Bloodletters. The demon hordes of Khorne consist of ferocious Bloodletters, deadly warriors believed to have been foremost among the Blood God's followers in mortal life, and whose will is as implacable and blood-hungry as Khorne himself. When loosened to the fray, Bloodletters sprint from one enemy to the next, hacking the foe apart before springing away in search of new victims. With each fresh kill, the Bloodletters loose great shouts of victory that echo across the battlefield and chill the souls of all who hear. Okay, pretty cool. I think that's a decent representation of the lore, but there are a few characteristics to talk about. So they can gain power as they kill, this was kinda expected, and they'll get stronger as they kill more and more units. So I don't know how strong Bloodletters can get, or if there's some sort of hard cap, but that sounds like a lot of fun. My only real issue here is the poor wording in the last characteristic. As with all demons, they will disintegrate and flee to the Chaos Realms when their leadership is broken. It's not really a true representation of what happens, so when they start to disintegrate, it's because they've either been defeated or what ties them to the Chaos Realms itself has been weakened. It's not the fact that they're fleeing. Bloodletters are terrified of Khorne, and they would not flee. It's just a lore inconsistency there which was kind of bothering me, but everything else sounds super cool. But let's move on now to the Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne. Khorne's Chosen, the Naked Slayers, the Taker of Skulls, deadly warriors believed to have been foremost amongst the Blood God's followers in mortal life, and whose will is as implacable and blood-hungry as Khorne himself. No, I didn't repeat myself from before, this is just CA doing a copy-pasta, but let's move on. Exalted Bloodletters gather in regiments, chanting their brutal praises to Khorne. In the fashion of the warriors they are believed to have once been, each unit marches beneath a gore-soaked banner upon which the names of their victims are inscribed. I wish we had banners in Warhammer 3, but let's move on to the characteristics. So they're supposed to be bigger and badder than the normal bloodletters. This can be expected given that they have the Exalted title. And they will share the same traits, but be stronger, more accurate, and hardier. Okay, expected once again. This is where it gets a little curious though. While a straight upgrade, more expensive, and later in the tech tree. What? So obviously I've not been able to play as the demons themselves, but that sounds super weird to me. Are the demons unlocked via a tech tree or something? This is kind of making me think that we might start off as just mortals with the basic mortal units, and then as we move on, we could probably claim skulls for a resource? Or it's just some basic tech tree, as you progress you'll unlock more and more units? I don't know, that still sounds very strange to me too. I do like these blog posts because they do give a lot of information, but sometimes they raise more questions than anything else. But let's move on now to the cavalry and chariots. First off, we have the Gore Beast chariot of Khorne. Gore Beasts are even heavier and sturdier than the other Chaos chariots. No normal beast would have the strength to pull such a massive instrument of war, and they are therefore pulled into battle by a Gore Beast. A muscular creature renowned for its violent temperament. I mean, isn't that a juggernaut on the artwork? In fact, we have seen Gore Beasts in different promotional pictures, so I'm not too sure why they're showing off a juggernaut there. These grunting brutes strike their prey with such shocking force that those not impaled upon jutting armor spikes are often torn apart by the impact. Even the lowliest of beasts recognizes the bulky shape of a Gore Beast as synonymous with death. Each ironclad chariot drawn by one of these formidable mutants is thus followed at some distance by circling carrion crows and slinking scavenger hounds waiting to feast on the bloody remnants of a Gore Beast grim harvest. Okay, so not too bad, everything sounds pretty cool. We do know that the units are constantly frenzied, and they are not too good for defense, but then again this is Khorne. We're not expecting a lot of defense, we're expecting just some hard-hitting brutality. What is really curious to me is that this says the cheapest option for cavalry of the Khornite horde. I'm still not expecting them to be fairly cheap, as chariots are still quite powerful. We're gonna have to wait and see how this goes, but it's really curious. But now we're going to move on to the heavy cavalry, with the first up being the Blood Crushers of Khorne. The most favoured of all bloodletters are granted the honour of becoming Blood Crushers. Blood Crushers are Khorne's shock cavalry, a deadly combination of battle-frenzied bloodletter and the unstoppable crushing mass of a juggernaut of Khorne. When the demonic legions go to war, bellowing hordes of Blood Crushers stampede across the battlefield, trampling Khorne's foes into unrecognisable pulp. When battle begins, Blood Crushers relentlessly hurl themselves at the strongest point of an enemy's lines. They hack, maim, and gore their way through the strongest troops the foe can muster, exalting Khorne's name with savage joy for each enemy slain. Okay, super cool, right? I actually really like these models. I have a bunch of them, also the same as the Skull Crushers too. While I didn't play a lot of Khorne on the tabletop, they just looked absolutely awesome. So what we know is that they are powerful shock cavalry and have increased physical resistance. These are going to be awesome line breakers, and they are vulnerable to banishment but will not rout. If anything, these are one of the units that I'm most hyped to play with Khorne's roster, because, I mean, what don't you like about them? They're just massive, hulking brutes which just charge into enemy lines. I mean, that's awesome. But let's just move on to the Skull Crushers now. Exalted in the eyes of Khorne, these murderous knights are gifted with juggernauts to carry them to war. These massive demonic mounts are made of living metal and pure rage. They are dealers of untold destruction who grind their foes beneath steel sinews and brass hooves. As the blood-crazed knights bellow their battle cries, their fearsome mounts snort steam and pour out divots the size of shallow graves before stampeding towards the ranks of their prey and flattening anything in their way. Okay, cool, so given the characteristics, we're also told that they are the most powerful human force in a Khornate army. That was kinda expected, they're Chaos Knights riding on juggernauts. Their powerful steeds stoke fear in the hearts of their enemies. Yeah, we can kind of expect them to cause fear. In fact, a lot of the units in the Khorne army can be probably causing fear. And lastly, they have one of the most terrifying, powerful charges in the old world. Again, very expected as, well, it's a steam-powered demon. It's going to be doing a lot of damage if it gets into any form of close combat, especially with pure kinetic force. Like the Blood Crushers, I'm really just wanting to play as these troops. I'm just very curious as to how a army with no magic and pretty much no range is going to work, and honestly it's hyping me up a little bit for it. But now let's move on to the monsters and beasts. There are a few that we can already expect, and one very big surprise. First off, we'll start off with the Chaos Warhounds. Yep, the generic Warhounds are also finding themselves here. In Norska, wolves and hounds prowl in the flickering shadows of the campfires made by the barbarian tribespeople of the frozen lands. The further north the tribes dwell, the more likely it is that the hounds that follow them will be mutants, their bodies swollen by the energies of chaos. Brutish and bloodthirsty, the Warhounds of Chaos are natural killers, built of muscle and fang that lurk in the wilderness in ravening packs. They will even charge a spear wall with total abandon, their only concern the moment when their slobbering jaws sink into some juicy, yielding flesh. Okay, yes, not the most exciting of units, I think we're all sure of that, but the thing is that Khorne's roster so far had no chaff. It is in fact stated that this is the lowest tier unit in Khorne's army. It's poor fodder, and you know, we kinda have to have these types of things because every faction has fodder. It'll also provide some basic cheap recruitment, so hey, anything works, doesn't it? But let's move on to the next unit, which is the Chaos Furies of Khorne. Furies are yowling shards of malevolent energy, chaos in its purest form. With little in the way of intelligence, they are utterly subservient to the whims of the dark gods, and shift in aspect and power as the balance of the dark pantheon alters. They are easily subjugated by other demons, whom they regard with a mix of dread and awe. Furies swarm at the edges of the battle, avoiding the thickest fighting if they can. Only when they sight a vulnerable victim do they descend, a wailing mass from which there can be no escape. Okay, so these are another pretty much chaff unit, though they're extremely fast moving and should be able to do a decent amount of damage if used correctly. Use this to pinpoint any wayward type of units such as artillery and take them out from that. They're also able to deploy ahead of the front lines to harass the enemy, so okay, they've got Vanguard too, and the Mark of Khorne confers additional spell resistance and a more powerful charge for them. Creative Assembly also confirm here that there are Furies dedicated to other gods too, so yeah, okay, cool, that works out quite well. We were expecting Furies in all forms. I hope that we'll also be able to see Furies of Chaos Undivided too, just pure chaotic energy. Next up we have the Fleshhounds of Khorne. Fleshhounds are Khorne's foremost tool of vengeance. When a being, mortal or demon, rouses the blood god's ire, he rises from the skull throne and sounds a single sonorous note on a great brass horn. This blast echoes through the mortal and demonic realms alike as a peal of portentous thunder, rousing fleshhounds from their slumber and loosing them upon the hunt. Few can survive gory pursuit by these relentless carnivores, for fleshhounds are faultless and instinctive trackers, able to harry their quarry across fen, forest and stone without once losing the scent. Alright, so essentially these are a pure demonic version of the Chaos Warhounds, demon war dogs, which are fairly powerful. In fact, on the tabletop they weren't half bad to use in the front line too. As stated before, they can be used as an upgraded version of the Chaos Warhounds, which means that you'll always have some fast-moving chaff in a certain sense, but they'll also be quite strong. In fact, they're dubbed Little Cavalry here. And we'll also have Collars of Khorne, which will give them incredible spell resistance, so that should be quite interesting. If you can upgrade these as you go along, they might even still be a very potent unit, and against any high spellcasting armies, they might actually be the unit of choice. Next, let's move on to the Spawn of Khorne. A grisly death is not the worst fate that one who has trod the path of Khorne can suffer, for the Blood God is inhumane and whimsical, and he makes no distinction between a beneficial or disadvantageous gift. Even the most vaunted Chaos Lord can find himself disfigured in an instant, his body racked by a multitude of debilitating mutations. Should Khorne continue to pile on his dubious gifts, the recipient will devolve into a mindless, hideous creature known as a Chaos Spawn. So yeah, Chaos Spawn, which we're already used to. I'm assuming that they'll also be fairly spell resistant because, you know, Mark of Khorne and all that, and obviously much stronger than a standard Chaos Spawn which you can find in standard Beastmen or Warriors of Chaos ranks. This, I'm assuming, will also be unbreakable as usual and be able to do a fair amount of damage. It'll be interesting to see how we could use them in the already quite powerful roster. Now, one of the biggest surprises to me, the Minotaurs of Khorne. To the Minotaurs of Khorne, a battlefield is a place of maddening excess. The scent of gore in their flaring nostrils drives them wild, and they bellow their hunger for all to hear. They charge with a thundering impact, horns lowered to impale, and then strike blow after blow against their hapless enemy. Once their victims have been hacked apart, the Khornators, well, that's a nice name, slake their thirst by tearing at raw flesh with their gore-encrusted nails, and gulping down great hunks of steaming meat even whilst the battle rages on around them. When called to war, these beasts reach into the piles of weapons and armor heaped in offering before the herdstones, equipping themselves with the largest and most formidable weapons they can find. These weapons were laid in celebration of victory, their erstwhile owners slain upon some forgotten battlefield. In amongst the rusted blades can sometimes be found those once carried by the warriors of long-lost empires, crafted using methods and metals no longer known to any of the peoples of the world, fragments of tarnished armor that might have been made for the guards of long-dead, forgotten kings. So two variants exist for this unit, dual axes or great weapons. Pretty good. You're expecting this type of heavy hitting anyway. They're armored, armor piercing, fearless and destructive. It's going to be interesting to see how they perform. I'm not sure if Minotaurs of Khorne or Khornators is their official name, and it's very unlikely that this is actually replacing Khorngors. Now, we've known for quite some time that we were going to get these Minotaur units anyway, but the reason why I'm excited about them is because the Monogod factions are true Monogod Chaos factions. It's actually quite nice to see a mixture of both mortal, beastmen and demon in one specific faction line, and I can't wait to see the other Chaos Gods because of this. Now let's move to a unit that some people might find quite controversial, the Soul Grinder of Khorne. When a demon's physical body is slain, he can surrender his true name to the Forge of Souls. The dark bargain sealed, his crippled essence is bound to a mighty warp metal husk. Thus, he is reborn as a Soul Grinder. A Soul Grinder's clanking tread shakes the ground with every step, and it is devilishly fast for a creature of its size, able to scuttle swift at a horse's gallop, or even faster should the scent of battle touch its nostrils. Piston-driven legs fought home with sickening force, crushing to bloody paste those beneath. Alright, let's talk about this unit, because I know a lot of people are going to say that this is way too 40k, but yes, it is a 40k unit, and it was also Warhammer Fantasy. In fact, it was one of those units which were just visually imposing, and people would bring it down as a monster which could do a lot of damage, but was also seen as a distraction beast too. It looks like it's also got some artillery pieces attached to it, so it can fire whilst on the move, which is going to be quite great, and it's highly resistant to both magical and physical harm, fairly well representing that of the tabletop variant too. And honestly, the moment that I saw this unit, I became quite excited, because I've actually got a few painted up. They're actually quite cool. Granted, mine are actually painted up for that of a Nurgle theme, but I can't wait to see how these work, and since it's called the Soul Grinder of Khorne, once again we can expect Soul Grinders for the other Chaos factions. Or at least I'm very much hoping so. But let's move on to the next unit, the Bloodthirster. Yes, the Exalted Bloodthirster will be that of a Lord character, but the standard Bloodthirster will be a monstrous unit. Those far enough away from Bloodthirsters to survive their onslaught commonly recall an overwhelming impression of vast size and unchecked barbarity, overwhelming fear and snarling death, riding upon Stygian wings that eclipse the sun. A bloodthirster's ruddy skin is covered with coarse fur and brass armor, slick and gleaming with the blood of innumerable victims. This armor is forged upon the demon's flesh by Khorne himself, and therefore becomes a living part of the demon, even whilst maintaining a brutal intelligence of its own. As such, even the bloodthirster's armor is wrathful and longs for slaughter. Okay, so we can pretty much expect this to act in the same way as the Lord. In fact, they say it here that it can even fly too. Doom stacks of this unit will be absolutely impressive, I'm assuming. 19 Bloodthirsters and an Exalted Bloodthirster Lord. It will be made even better if, of course, the fly toggle is able to be implemented, but we still don't know anything about that just yet. Lots of big beasties for Khorne, but now we can move to artillery and war machines, because there are two. First is the Blood Shrine of Khorne. Mounted upon a carnage-fueled demon engine, the Blood Shrine judders, spins, and zooms across battlefields at great speeds, desperate to be smothered in gore, and so the gaze of their mighty patron, the Blood God, and his most powerful servants. The Blood Shrine is a mobile altar that will empower Karnef's demons to greater heights of butchery and wanton slaughter. Okay, so we're getting a unit version of the Blood Throne in the form of the Blood Shrine, and this is quite good because it's going to give us a extra type of buffing unit. The fact that it also heals in every moment that it's in melee combat is quite good, as of course that means that you can have it in the front line and not worry too much. We know that the Blood Shrine also boosts the morale of nearby allies. I'm not sure if any extra buffs are also coming into effect, but we also have to take into account that this is still in its alpha/beta form, I'm assuming, so anything is subject to change. And lastly, we have the Skull Cannon of Khorne. As the Skull Cannon grinds across the battlefield, its spiked wheels and rollers mangle everything in its path. Those who somehow survive the initial onset of the grinders are fed into the screaming Skull Cannon's gaping maw, there to be roasted by demonic fire and ground to fragments. Only the skulls, so beloved of Khorne, are retained and fed into the mighty cannon atop the machinery from which the demon engine takes its name. They slam into the enemy ranks, scattering foes like ninepins, and leaving a trail of scorched and blazing dead behind. So this is the main artillery piece for Khorne, well, mainly the only one depending on how the Soul Grinder works, and it's also quite fast and decent in melee combat. The good thing about this too here is that it can fire on the move, which is quite brutal, and it can also replenish its ammunition by getting into melee combat, which I think is going to be working quite well. That means that since they move around quite quickly and you can spend your ammo, you can also throw them in like a chariot, regain some ammo, and then come back out. When you start dealing with hordes of Skaven, Greenskins, Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, and so on, you're gonna find these to be quite useful, I'm imagining. Plus, come on, they look kinda cool, so yeah. With all that being said, this was the full complete roster for Khorne that's going to be available at launch of Warhammer 3. It's quite varied, it's got a decent amount of different types of units. Yes, they all kind of fall around the same theme and so on, but keep in mind, of course, this is Khorne. We're not expecting a lot of variety when it comes to Khorne, but rather brutality, and I think it's been done very well. If this is the case for the remaining demon factions, I have a lot of high hopes. Everything showcased so far has that great representation of Khorne as it should be in a lore sense. I'm hoping that we won't have to wait too long until we can start seeing the other demonic factions, but until then we're gonna have to wait. What do you guys think about Khorne so far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.